So market research, quite a large section because it's really 3 sections in one. You need to understand and distinguish between the difference between primary and secondary market research and explain the benefits and the problems. You need to define and distinguish between quantitative and qualitative market research and again explain benefits and problems. Or you may get a question that's just about market research in general, so it'd be looking at all types of market research and the benefits and the problems of that in general. It's unlikely though that you'd get a question that's going to ask you about all 3 sections on the exam. It's either going to be one of these sections. So, market research, it's the process of planning, collecting and analysing data relevant to marketing decision making. So we're really finding out information about our customers, or we're finding out information about the general market trends, or even about competitors. It's going outside of your business and finding out information. So, primary market research, also known as field research, is the collection of data that does not already exist. So you're having to go out, you're having to collect this. It might be a questionnaire asking with customers, or it might be observations done, but it's you actually collecting this data or employing another agency to collect the data. Whereas secondary market research is looking at data that already exists because it was collected for another purpose. So it's there. It might be sales information that was collected just for auditing purposes, but because it has been collected, you can analyse how many packets of toilet roll customers buy on Tuesdays. Okay, so what's really important is that you can give examples of different types of market research. So when we're looking at primary market research, the way that you'd collect it, questionnaires and observation I've already mentioned, maybe some experimentation, maybe surveys or focus groups done with customers. Whereas secondary market research, probably data that already exists, data records. It could be other websites or journals or research that's been published, that's been carried out by other market researchers. Could be the Office of National Statistics that's published information, or census information, or even company reports with financial information in it. The advantages of carrying out primary market research is because you've not collected the data before you. It's the first time you're collecting this data. You'd have thought about, what is it that we want to achieve? What data do we actually want to get? So the data that you collect would meet your specific needs and specific requirements. And because you've instigated this process of collecting the data, you have a little bit more control over the process. Well, you have a lot of control of the process, but as well you can validate where it's come from, and you have more knowledge of how reliable this data is. However, you're actually going to have to carry out this process yourself, so it's going to be very time consuming, and because of that there's an opportunity cost, so it's expensive. You could have spent that time doing something else. Whereas secondary market research, it's going to be cheaper than primary market research because the data already exists, so it's going to be quicker to be able to access that data. But if it comes from an external source, it might not be very reliable because you don't have as many details over how the data was actually collected. It may be quite out of date by the time you look at it, and it might be interesting, but it might not meet your specific need. So it wasn't particularly collected to answer a specific question that you as a business have, but it gives you lots of information in the general direction that you're looking at. Okay, so here is a past paper question, and from this I've got the nice evaluative question here. Consider the view that primary market research carried out by Under Armour is of much greater value to the business than its secondary market research. So they've given you this really nice case study here. So first thing you really need to do is read through it and identify where the primary market research is and where the secondary market research is. So I'll try and get I want a highlighter really. Here we go. The WRU, so Welsh Rugby Union, said the company's design and manufacture teams have been studying Welsh rugby and its history and heritage as part of its market research. So there we have a kind of a little clue to what market research has gone on. So you might be thinking, I wonder, you know, how they've done that. Maybe they've read journals or articles that other people have written. So that tends to be more kind of secondary market research. And here, earlier on in the case study, we've got the kit will be based on technology used to produce the kit for top American football teams. So maybe that's primary market research that they've done before. So they're using, here we have the company called Under Armour, have produced products before for other sports teams. So maybe they've carried out their own market research into what business is like, and looking at what customers want. So some nice, I mean, there's not a huge amount from this case study, but there's something in there. And the point is, they wouldn't have written this case study had they not wanted you to pick things out of it. Okay, so primary market research carried out by Under Armour is of much greater value to the business than secondary market research. First thing you probably want to do is distinguish between primary market research, give some examples of the primary market research that they might have carried out, maybe base it on this first example here. Define secondary market research, give some examples of secondary market research that they could have carried out. Here it seems like there's some nice secondary market research there about the history and the heritage. And then we'd look at some advantages of primary market research over secondary market research. What advantages does secondary market research have over primary market research? And then conclude with, do you agree with this view? Do you disagree with this view? You know, why? What is the most important reason why you agree or you disagree? So back to the specification objectives. So we've looked at what market research is and some of the nature of market research. We distinguish between desk and field research and the benefits and problems of desk and field research. Now let's have a look at quantitative and qualitative research and the problems and benefits of that. So quantitative data, as the name suggests, is the collection of data that can be measured, so it's quantifiable. It could be a question like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like chocolate? You know, there's going to be, it's closed questions, there's going to be a kind of set answer. Whereas qualitative research is a collection of data about attitudes, beliefs or intentions. So describe how you feel about chocolate. Now quantitative data will give you a statement, you know, the information will be a statement. Does someone like chocolate? How much do they like chocolate? Do they like it more than, you know, ice cream? Whereas qualitative data will give you the reasons behind those answers. So why do they like it more or less than ice cream? And so on. Okay, so when we're looking at advantages and disadvantages, again, we have to do this like we did for primary and secondary market research. So quantitative data you can collect through statistical data, sales figures, market share, those types of financial information as well. Advantages, it's quite easy to interpret because there's not very much interpretation. So, you know, 70% of respondents said, you know, that they like product A more than product B, you know, is quite objective information. And you can put this information as well into graphs. You can present it in a very visual way. It's easy to compare to other information. You can track it over time. So do people like our product more or less than they used to? Those types of things. However, it is cold data, so it doesn't tell you the reasons why consumers have made the decisions that they have made. Whereas qualitative data, you're going to have to find methods of getting people to talk about their feelings, their beliefs, their attitudes, their opinions. So focus groups or interviews or questionnaires that have qualitative questions on there. So they're not going to be kind of closed questions. They're going to be explain your answer. Those kind of box questions that people tend to fill in like really quickly and maybe don't spend very much time on them, which is why focus groups and interviews are more commonly used. Your advantages are that you can get deeper analysis so you can really get to the issue, why consumers have made certain choices. However, it is very much open to interpretation, much more than quantitative data is. So, you know, if you imagine that you've got two friends and you ask them how a certain party was on Friday night, you might get two completely different explanations. One might say, yeah, it was all right. And the other one say, oh, fantastic, it was the best party I've ever been to. And they're both at the same thing, and they both have very similar feelings about it. They're just both different people, and they have different ways of expressing themselves. So you do have those problems when you're dealing with human beings. They sometimes have different ways of expressing themselves to mean the same thing. This kind of interpretation may cause kind of arguments about what the data is really showing. So you've collected the market research, but analysing it and interpreting it may be more difficult. So this was a past paper question. With the aid of examples, distinguish between quantitative and qualitative market research for 6 marks. So quantitative here, data that can be collected, different examples here. The researcher, this is a really good point actually, this one further down the page, the researcher knows clearly in advance what he or she is looking for, because they are closed questions. So you need to have anticipated the possible answers that they can give to you. Recommended during the latter phases of research projects, less open to interpretation, data is in the form of numbers and statistics, all things that we've said. Whereas qualitative, maybe more time consuming to collect and draw general conclusions, recommended during the earlier phases of research projects. I suppose, you know, when we're looking at why is this more latter phases and this is more earlier phases, I suppose because at the beginning you might not know what the possible answers could be, so you're going out to try and collect, analyse or collect data on a certain question, whereas near the end of your research project, when you're maybe asking more quantitative questions, you know all the possible answers that respondents are going to give. Data is in the form of words, pictures or objects. So I think that's pretty kind of clear and a good coverage of those specification objectives. But looking more generally at market research, so I don't know if I've got it on here, no, there was a question quite a few years ago now about extensive market research, carrying out extensive market research, and what are the benefits, what are the problems of doing that. So in terms of being a benefit, it's going to give you lots of information. It might give you information about your own business, it might give you information about your customers, but isn't having more information a good thing? It can help you make better decisions, and that can help you reduce risk as well. If you're bringing out a new product, you can help tailor it to the customer's needs, and it's going to make it more likely that the customer's going to buy it. It also provides this link with the outside world, so you get this nice feedback link so you can strengthen your product and improve upon your product. And you know, you're not going to know the size of the market unless you go out there and do a little bit of research about it and find out how big is the market, is it growing, is it decreasing in size. And that is very important when we look at market share, market size, market growth in another presentation. However, your problems with market research are that just because you get lots of information about your customers and they tell you, maybe for example, they tell you exactly what they want, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to provide that. So remember, think back to those problems that we had with market orientation. You know, just because you make something the customer wants doesn't mean you're going to make a good product. There are problems with reliability as well. When we're looking at questions around people's income, people are very sensitive about those areas. Health problems, very sensitive about those areas. They might not want to fully tell someone holding a clipboard all about their life problems. So the data might be unreliable. If you phrase a question in a more positive or negative way, it might be leading and it might get someone to give a certain answer, and especially with secondary market research, where you can't always validate where the data's come from if it's external data. And I think this is a really good point as well. Customers might not know what they want in a new or emerging market. So customers might tell you that they don't want something when actually when they're given it they quite like it. So that could be kind of internet banking. You know, if you went 10 years ago and said to people, would you want internet banking? People are like, oh, that's a bit risky. Oh, I don't know if I'd want that. Whereas now you show people and they're like, oh, this is great. I definitely want internet banking. Or you could, you could get a very new product. For example, the iPod, when it first came out, quite a few people were like, well, I don't really get it, because surely you could just have a CD player and it would do the same thing. So that's something that could mean that if you've got a very modern product or innovative or new product, getting customer feedback on what they want might not be the most illuminating thing. Okay, large area there, but usually there is a question on market research, but it comes into so many different areas of marketing as well. It's worth revising this area pretty well.